because this is really the opportunity for us to update you in relation to the new Dunedin Hospital. And that is a really exciting development for the DHB, for the city and for the district. And so I'm joined today by Richard Thompson, one of the Deputy Commissioners, Chris Fleming, the Chief Executive, and most importantly by Pete Hodgson, who is the Chair of the Southern Partnership Group, the group appointed by the Minister to govern the rebuild of Dunedin Hospital. So what we collectively want to share with you is the work to date, where we are, what the next steps will be. And the timing of our doing so is at least in part prompted by the release of the Master Site Plan, which is a document, the purpose of which really is to demonstrate that all of the services we need can fit on the site and work intelligently together. It's certainly not the final shape or placement, but it is a bit of a steer. So Pete will update you in relation to the building part of the project. The most important part, though, of today's session is the opportunity for you to ask questions of us, matters of concern or interest to you. So perhaps before I invite Pete to update you in relation to the building project, Chris and I would like to start by perhaps painting the bigger picture. As we have previously shared with you, this is not simply a matter of the DHB moving progressively from its existing buildings into new buildings as from 2023, and then addressing the issue of how to make those new buildings work. The building of this new hospital really provides the catalyst for us to collectively reshape the delivery of health services in the lower part of the South Island, and we need to grasp that opportunity. The reporting and analysis that underpins the rebuild work to date has demonstrated the progressive growth in demand for hospital-based services, primarily around an ageing population. So what we do know is that if we were to continue to deliver health services as we have in the past, we would need much more physical space than is presently planned, and we would need to enlarge our workforce significantly. So continuing to deliver health services as we have in the past is simply unsustainable. It's unsustainable in terms of physical space and the size of buildings. It's unsustainable in terms of our workforce. Where would that additional workforce come from, recognising that the challenges faced by this DHB are probably replicated in the other DHBs in New Zealand? And it's unsustainable in terms of financial cost. So the planning for the new hospital really reflects the DHB's focus on primary and community care, on care being delivered closer to home, on a district-wide network of care, including our rural providers, and on hospital-based care being there when required, but focused on the sickest people who need acute resource-intensive care. So as a DHB, we cannot leave that reshaping of our services until the day that we move into the new facilities. And so we are presently working with you, looking at the future delivery of services and what they will look like. What services can be delivered by primary and community care, and what does the secondary component of those individual services look like? And I appreciate that that work is challenging for us all. But that's something of the bigger picture. The focus today is very much on the new hospital and those new buildings, and the importance of the project to the long-term delivery of health services in this region cannot be overstated. The success of that new building, though, is inextricably linked with the wider program of work being undertaken by the DHB. One cannot succeed without the other. There is that inextricable connection. And so I'd invite Chris to speak to you briefly about that wider program of work.
Thanks for that, Kathy. And I've only got one slide because we all want to hear from Pete in terms of where to with the major redevelopment of New Dunedin Hospital. Just as Kathy stressed in her introduction, the rebuild of Dunedin Hospital is predicated on the assumption that we'll have strong, vibrant services right across the continuum. That Southland Hospital is working as effectively and efficiently as a part of the system. The rural hospitals, that the rollout of our primary community strategy, which we rolled out last year, healthcare homes will be completely rolled out across the district, and then these things called community health hubs, which you can see in the slide there. Community health hubs won't be where primary care services will be provided. Community health hubs will be where integrated care between primary, community and secondary care will be provided. And the rebuild of Dunedin Hospital is predicated not on Dunedin Hospital being smaller, but Dunedin Hospital being smaller than the counterfactual of if we just watched the population age and we keep providing care services and activities in exactly the same way as we have now. And whilst a lot of the focus and the attention, both in this presentation and also a lot of the activity over the coming 12 months, will be on concept plans and facilities and transformation groups, etc. It is vital that each and every one of you also engage in the pathway that we're taking around the development of the community health hubs. There's been a lot spoken about out-of-scope services, and I've got letters about out-of-scope services. What's going to happen with creche, what's going to happen with parking, what's going to happen with orthotics. Each and every one of the out-of-scope services, the DHB has to come up with a plan over the coming years as to how we're going to work with stakeholders to find viable solutions. We've got a large workforce, we've got a large female workforce. Doesn't matter whether there is a creche in our plans or not, we have to have a childcare plan to make timely accessible services available to our workforce. Likewise, we have to have a parking plan. Likewise, we have to have somewhere for our products. But the thing that I would draw your attention to is the community health hubs are not focused on the out-of-scope services. The community health hubs are focused on the in-scope services. How will diabetes services, as an example, be provided in the near future? Sure as anything, there will be diabetes facilities in the new hospital, but as we've heard from Patrick, he has a strong desire around a diabetes hub. So they will be a part of community health hubs, as will many of the in-scope services, providing services right across the continuum, both within the hospital and also in the hub. So all I'm pleading for you, while we turn the rest of the attention of this meeting into the hospital redevelopment and the next steps and the next activities, can I really just reinforce your need to engage in that wider hub conversation, engage in thinking about the models of care, not only within the physical building that we're building on the Dunedin Hospital campus, but models of care as your services might relate to right across the health continuum. And there won't be many services that will be entirely in the hospital or entirely out in the community. Many will transcend both. So to remind you, we've already got healthcare homes now rolled out to 40% of our population, and in the coming months, we're going to be going through a co-design process for services that are going to be provided in the community health hubs. Whilst at the same time, behind the scenes, I'm working on identifying who's going to actually come up with the capital to develop these facilities, which I'm quite confident will occur. So that's where we're heading through. So we're just going to pause for a second, Pete, in terms of recognising the events of the last couple of days. There have been staff directly impacted in terms of, I've heard of a staff member who was in one of the mosques at the time, through to staff members who have got family who have been directly impacted. We will be holding a more substantive remembrance service, multi-faith remembrance service in the coming days or weeks as we hear. But perhaps if we can just have a moment's silence.
There's a few people in the room I'm going to introduce as I make my remarks. I'm going to start off with boring stuff, which is how the admin works and what the SPG is and why we bother to have it in the first place. It stands for Southern Partnership Group. I convene it. The reason it exists is that Cabinet determines that it should. There are a number of people on the SPG who are appointed by Cabinet and a number of people who are there sort of ex officio or because we need them. And we don't much distinguish between them, and it meets every month and it has busy meetings. And it has a sort of a governance role. It continues to say to the DHB, why don't you do this, or to the Ministry of Health, why don't we do that, or why didn't we do that, or can we do the other. It tries to add value. It offers independent assurance to ministers. By ministers we mean the Minister of Health, whose name is David Clark, the local MP, and the Minister of Finance, Grant Robertson, who is also, as you probably mostly know, went to school at King's College, so knows this area pretty well.
Speak up a little, please.
I'm sorry. Okay, so I'm just going to do as you say and yell out a little more. Is that okay? You're okay? So that's roughly what we do. There are some people on the reason for SPG is that one outfit called the taxpayer or the government or the Ministry of Health is building this, and another outfit called the Southern DHB will become its owner. So you need to make sure they're okay with each other, and so that's what the partnership is. And we do have a Ministry of Health wallah in the room. Officials don't like being pointed out, but there's one. His name's John Hazeldine, and he's come down for the meeting, and it's great. Thank you. And I think the SPG gets on well. We fight a lot, but we don't fight each other. In other words, there's a lot of contention to be had, but not a lot of, there's no egos in the room. It's a good way of saying it. And then on top of that, because we're Dunedin, we set up another little outfit called the Local Advisory Group. And the Local Advisory Group does a bunch of stuff that's to do with the hospital, but not directly so. So it concerns itself, for example, of whether or not, given that we have to heat the hospital, whether we should be heating some other buildings as well with a district heating scheme that might be a whole lot bigger than the one we've got at the moment, and might be wood chip fired instead of coal fired, which is what we've got at the moment. And that piece of work, for example, comes out of the Local Advisory Group. We're doing a feasibility study. And the work that you've seen regarding the one-way system and whether we need to change that, and if so, which way should we consult about, and if so, over what period of time, that's being led by the city and the New Zealand Transport Authority, and both of those groups are on the Local Advisory Group. And Jim Harland has just walked in from Christchurch. He used to have Sue Bidrose' job. There's Sue Bidrose, she runs the city these days. David Benson-Pope's there, he chairs the planning committee. All of these people are on the Local Advisory Group, along with Ngāi Tahu and the Regional Council and the Chamber of Commerce, and so on and so on. And we do a bunch, and there's Laura, who's the administrator for that group, and they, that group, which I happen to convene, but anyone could, does a bunch of stuff that we are doing in Dunedin that would not be done as easily elsewhere, because we are big enough to need a hospital and small enough to know each other to work out how to do it together, sort of. So that's the admin, the end. There are countless other groups, actually. I shouldn't say the end. I really do need to introduce John Adams, who runs the clinical leadership group, which is, given that we've got this meeting involving you guys, is kind of you guys and all of those, what are those FIT groups now stand for? Facilities and Transition Groups. They used to be called work groups or something, and someone's changed the name. But they all feed in and lead into the clinical leadership group, and that leadership group has its voice at the Southern Partnership Group through John. So I'm not saying it's perfect, but it's pretty elaborate. And we are pretty flexible, but only to a point. Now, here's 3 things I want to say that are at the top of my head. That there's one bad thing and 2 good things. The one bad thing is, what is the biggest risk we face in getting that thing that was up there before built? And it used to be working out where the site was, it used to be working out where the money might come from, it used to be trying to work out whether to build it at all or not. And all of those decisions have passed and taken. And the biggest risk now is finding the workforce to do it, to build it. And I'm not going to dwell on that today, because I'm not talking to a bunch of people who might be taking up apprenticeships. But I'm telling you that that's the thing that we are most engaged with. The local advisory group is very engaged with that. Sue's got a bunch of work going on about housing in Dunedin to accommodate people who might be coming from out of town to build. And we're really trying to make sure we don't have as many, we're really trying to make sure we home grow as many people as we can. Lots and lots of activity about that, existing and forthcoming. So that's the big threat, is that you hold a big hospital build and not enough people come. It's happening in Christchurch now. They are not finishing their building. There are Filipinos all over the place, and they are not getting it done because there are not enough of them. So it's not a minor issue building the largest hospital in New Zealand's history in a relatively small city, some distance from a labour supply. That's the biggest risk. What are the biggest opportunities? One of them is what you've heard from already, from Kathy, and from Chris, and that's the changes that are facilitated by, sometimes caused by, but usually catalysed by or facilitated by the advent of this thing, this new big hospital. And about that I will say no more, because I'm not a health professional. I'm not on the board of the DHB. You guys can say a lot about that if you like. I'm just saying that it's really, in a way, more important than the building itself. And the second big positive for me is the place-changing effect of this capital work on the place that's my home and yours. And that's considerable, whether it's that thing I was telling you about decarbonising the CBD because we might be able to get some wood-fired district heating scheme up or other, or indeed the one-way system, or indeed the housing, or indeed the fact that we might get the recidivism rate at the Milton Hilton down, because we'll be able to, one hopes, get people out of there and into some form of employment for some years with this thing coming along. All of those positives are there, and the one that I wanted to just dwell on before I got into a bit of detail, the one I wanted to dwell on was to say that it may be that we're going to, with the advent of this hospital, teach health professionals differently in this town than we do at the moment. And a manifestation of that idea, about which I don't really understand a lot, is a thing called the Interprofessional Learning Centre, which, just think about the words that we've chosen to name the building. It's a pretty small building. It's hardly appearing on anyone's maps yet, but you will hear more of it. And it's the idea that it's the idea that maybe some nursing education starts to occur near a hospital instead of at the Polytechnic, or more at the hospital instead of at the Polytechnic, and ditto other things that are taught at the Polytechnic, such as counselling or midwifery or OT or whatever. But it's also the idea that existing health professionals and wannabe health professionals are mixed up a bit more than they are. For example, when they come to access simulation services is often the best example to give, because both postgraduates and existing practitioners and undergraduates use increasingly various forms of simulation technologies. Well, we can have the best of those if we amalgamate the needs of the city, of the university and the Polytechnic and the DHB, and it looks like we're going to be able to pull that off. And I don't think it's happened in New Zealand before, and I think it matters. And once that happens, folk who do get pedagogy, and I don't pretend to, say, well, that enables us to then produce a more rounded, integrated graduate, whether they're a dentist or a physiotherapist or a nurse or a doctor, and for those people to be better aware of the other disciplines with whom they must spend their lives working. So that'll do for opening remarks. Now, in 2 weeks' time, a couple of buildings will come down and you'll think that action's begun. It hasn't particularly. It's just that we've got a couple of buildings we can knock down, so we thought we would. Tiny little buildings. A lot of what will happen soon, you won't see. We don't own the land yet. We own one block. It's all paid for, the Cadbury's block. The other block, the northern block, the so-called Wilson's block, has 8 owners. There's ink dry in only one case. The other 7 are under negotiation. Quite a few of them are really quite close. I won't be drawn on detail except to say that land acquisition is not keeping me awake. I'm not concerned about it. It feels okay. And from that, various consents get progressed. There are things like the heritage aspects of a consent to be considered. There's consent for demolition, there's consent for construction, etc., etc. But mostly, the coming year will be about a thing called design. And you saw an artist's impression of what the hospital might look like. You can't stop architects from drawing the final product even though they haven't started it. You know that that's a fantasy or a great work of New Zealand fiction, but nonetheless, design has begun. It occurs in 5 phases. We've finished phase 1. Phase 2, I suppose you could say, began Thursday before last. Oh yeah, we've got some pictures up for that, that's good. So that's the phase 1 thing, and we can take questions or comments on that. There's the Interprofessional Learning Centre, just recently introduced. There's what we hope we can do to retain the heritage of the site. We don't think we need it. We think we can salvage that. And of course you will have all understood that this building here goes ahead of that building there. And I think you all understand the reasons. I'm going to just gabble through them again. In essence, the existing facility will not service its population well enough until this building is due to open, which is November 2028. So we need to build that building before that. And it will open in November 2023, except for a small part of it, which will open in November 2024. This building here will contain 3 day surgery theatres, which is the essential piece of kit needed to go back to the existing hospital and give it a much more productive last 5 years of its life than it would otherwise have. because that enables changes to be made to the existing, let's call it the front door of the existing hospital, and if you want to get into some detail on that, you can. That's what master site planning looks like. There's quite a lot of detail behind it. It's in the public arena. I think my 12 months must be running close, so I'm going to say we've just begun the second phase of design, called concept design. I think we began it a Thursday or two ago. We will be using the same consortium who did that. They are a mixture, they're substantially drawn from, most of the work's done in Brisbane, some of it's done in Wellington, and some of the work for the second phase will be done in Scotland. And then we will go to market for the big architectural design contract, which will be huge. It will cost almost as much as, better not say this publicly, it will cost many tens of millions of dollars. Let's just leave it at that. If you take all of the cost of the design of the hospital and add all of the engineering consultancies or the traffic management planner or the town planner or the sound engineer or the fire engineer or whatever the hell it is, add them all up. All of the consultancies, you still haven't picked up a hammer. You've spent about 20% of your budget. You've spent more than it cost to build that stadium down there. That's the size of this thing is substantial. So we're about to enter the second phase. We'll disturb the ground early next year when we start to put in ground services. Still haven't put in any foundations, but we're asking ourselves, is the ground fit for purpose? Do we need to decontaminate it? How do we put in the drainage systems of the little, all of the horizontal infrastructure, the long and skinny stuff, and you prepare the ground for whatever form of, finished all your geotechnical stuff, that sort of work, that ground preparation is, and therefore the beginning, the construction phase, is likely to be at the beginning of next year. Building, the little building is relatively easy. We think it'll take 350 people. We already have them. They are building the dental school and the animal research facility, and they'll be building the performing arts and so on at the university and other bits and pieces around town. It's the big one where we need 950 people for 4 or 4.5 years, plus a shoulder crew of 400, 500, 600, if you know what I mean, by a shoulder, ramping up and ramping down. That's where the challenge will come. Thank you. We'll go to, who's going to chair it? You can chair it, Chris.
Right, as you can tell, Pete sticks to process and he's stuck to a presentation. Chris, over to you for questions on any other subjects.
Just a note that we'll have noticed there's no microphone, so if you can repeat the question, just so you know.
So Pete's talked about each of these things in terms of the wider impact, the training, and we are going to be articulating both for you guys and also for the community. We obviously need you. We need you to be engaged in our facilities and transformation groups. We need you to be engaged in the co-designer and primary community models of care. And we're also providing the community opportunities to be involved. Pete and we should have introduced Hamish. Stand up, Hamish. Hamish Brown is the new program director, reporting directly to me as a part of the executive leadership team, and we'll be working with the ministry and with SPG. But we're going to be having regular updates at the Community Health Council that we established 18 months ago. We're going to have regular forums over the coming years in terms of community forums, but also inviting community to stick their name down through the Community Health Council, because some of the facilities and transformation groups, some of the co-design processes, we want to have consumers directly involved. We don't think we need consumers in the clinical records, the design of the clinical records department. but actually consumers should be directly involved in the design of the emergency department and of the front entrances, etc. So we'll have involvement and opportunity, and eventually we're working on a joint program office between the DHB and the ministry and all the consultants that are going to come to town. We're also going to be working on some forms of interactive displays so that people that do want to pop along every now and then to see where things are, they'll be able to interact in that way. So different levels. But you guys, it's your hospital, you guys are going to be the ones working in it, so you need to be involved in both those opportunities. But questions? There's no limit to questions. We've got plenty of comments through here. Lisa.
Lisa Horrell, I'm the head of the anesthetic department at Dunedin Hospital. So we have been, our department's been significantly involved in the first building at the stage. We have in a lot of the other processes. And we've raised quite significant concerns about that very first building. And haven't really had good feedback on our concerns. We've had some, we've said yes, we've heard you, what you had to say, but we're concerned about the data collection, assumptions, unmet need, the fact that it's separate from our main hospital, and the number of the operating theatres. And we hear the story from Kathy that we need to change the way we do things, but you can't put operations into primary care. You have to, we're really concerned about the volume of operating theatres in that first stage and then going forward. And I have seen, just from my own experience going through Australia and New Zealand, that within a week we have got that wrong in just about every single rebuild that I've seen. I've just been in Wellington this last week. They are running at 105% bed capacity. They've got bed block in their PACU. They're cancelling elective surgery, which is where we earn our money, because they just can't get operations done. And the assumptions and a lot of the information that was written about the day surgery on that initial build is flawed. And we've stated, with the information that we have, where we see the flaws, but we haven't really we don't think there's a robust process about getting back to us and saying, rather than yes, we've taken note.
Okay. Can I just say, I'm one of the surgeons and I totally agree with what Lisa's saying.
So is the general thesis that we're building not enough? Is that what you're saying?
Well, we were really concerned right at the beginning about the day surgery. Initially we were told there was 2 day surgery theatres and then the capacity to perhaps use one of the endoscopy suites. Well, we know that gastroenterology and, with the bowel screening project that, they're going to use that up, in our view.
So
you might know the details of that, but not enough.
Let me try to see if I can get your argument. Are you saying that the small building will have too few day surgery units? Is that
on the initial brief that we got earlier this year? Yes.
So I guess a couple of challenges. Step one in the concept design thing, I'm looking to Hamish and John. Step one is to reaffirm and revisit those core assumptions.
Great.
Step two, the current planning is 3 day surgical theatres and 3 endoscopy suites in that building. It will be opened in stages though.
There's change.
Absolutely. And one of the tensions that we have in our process is are the time bounds, and we're working actively with the ministry and the consultants to make sure that we have realism around the timeframes associated with feedback. The second element is there is, in terms of the design stuff, there is some flexible space in terms of the only thing I can guarantee you, we will get it wrong in terms of size. It will be too big or it will be too small. No plan ever delivers an exactly perfect facility. What we're doing on the majority of things is having shell space that will be like, we've just seen what's happened in ICU with the redevelopment of ICU and how torturous it is to do work in live clinical facilities, but there's some shelf space associated with those processes. The last thing is that it probably is where the clinical leadership group will come into its forefront, is that after we've been through all this activity, inevitably there will be conflicts and challenges between departments. The co-location of departments will be the most obvious one where there will be conflicts, and I think that's where John is going to earn his keep as the chair of the clinical leadership group, in terms of ultimately once the envelope of funding has been established, we will get down into some situations where we have to trade things off. The bit that is really important though is the critical areas of radiology, theatres, ICU and ED are the quite complex physical things, as opposed to, you know, if we have inadequate beds, you can go, well, actually we could build some more wards over here, sort of thing, in the future. Whereas if we screw up the theatre, radiology, ED, you kind of screw up the heart, and ICU, we screw up the heart of the hospital.
So we're concerned about the process, and we're concerned about the data, and we're concerned about the numbers, and we're concerned about the feedback, to our feedback, because we put a lot of work into it. And
okay, you are aware that the current the current thinking is 3 + 3. Is that new? That's not news to you, is it?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Is that good news?
Yes, but that also has not taken into account the fact that we already have a procedure room, which is sort of half an operate. That's disappeared. I mean, that's not in the. So we've got 2 theatres now. One of them, 2 day surgery theatres now. One of them in the new building, when you have 3, is going to use work that's already done in our main operating theatre as an ophthalmology is going to go into there. So we're still left with exactly the same 2 numbers, if that's what happens, plus there's no account for our procedures. So we're basically, even with 3 operating theatres, to me, that still looks like we've got less.
Okay. Here's what I would say. The concept planning for the little outfit, the little building, will be finished in September of this year.
Yeah.
For the big building, November of this year. We're starting to put them onto different tracks.
Yeah,
so there's your opportunity. You've just learned something that's new and good, but not good enough. Is probably what I'm getting from you. So stick with it.
We haven't got that feedback. We've got no feedback, and we're concerned about the feedback and then our next response to that, because we put a lot of work into it. There's
no doubting that you put a lot of work into it.
Yeah.
You better be clear that you won't always get what you want.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so please continue to put work in it. I think the main thing that's come out of it for me is that the feedback loop didn't work.
Not that well.
Not in this case.
I think certainly the facilities and transformation group, there is one for the perioperative, and obviously the September-November challenges 2 parts make the whole, and so the answer for September is kind of going to be dependent on the answer for November as well, so it's about it. I know in the plan, John, there are procedure rooms. I can't say whether there's a procedure room Lisa's talking about, but we have that, and the schedule of accommodation in the concept design process, so that's going to happen over the next wee while, is going to be revisiting those. But we are we will be then getting close to those tough decisions about future trade-offs.
Just for everyone else, in case you don't know, have we got 10 or 11 theatres in the current facility? I'm not sure which. I think it's 10 plus midwifery.
9 + 2.
9 + 2, all right.
Plus
12. Plus 1, yeah.
We've got 10 or 11 theatres, okay? Woodnova seems to be quite sure. We're going to have either 18 or 17 in the new one. So it ain't the same number. It's different.
I'm Debbie Craig, Senior in charge at MIT. A more generalised thing, and I think I'm speaking for a lot of people in the room, we all put a lot of work into our recommendations and everything, and our frustrations throughout the procedure was we would get together, put a piece of work in, we'd go to a meeting, and the old thing popped up again, and then we'd thrash it out with everyone, we'd disappear, we'd come back, the same thing popped up again, and then we put in our letters and we go this, that, and they go, thank you for your feedback. And I'm just talking in very, I mean, we've had, and Carolyn knows, a very robust conversation, and we think that the end is in sight and we are getting our message through, but it's been a very, very frustrating process where the same mistakes keep appearing time after time after time, and I think that's what probably most people in the room are wanting to hear, that it's fixed there and then, and the next time we go for a meeting, that piece of work doesn't appear as the original.
And to achieve that, we need deliberate deadlines, realistic deadlines.
And minuted meetings, because that was a real
Yeah.
issue. You know, they were like, we discussed this. No, you didn't.
And in the early stages of the IBC, the consultants flew into town, had a whole hive of activity, and then all departed. It got better, I think, in the latter part, where there was resident experts that came into town. And certainly in terms of one of the pushes that we have had in partnership with the ministry is the consultants being appropriately resourced that they can meet their deadlines as well. In saying that, this is always going to be a complex pathway and a complex process, and so we're committing to the right pathway. There will be times, but what I would be expecting would be if there are times when either the CLG just simply needs to make a call, whether I as Chief Executive, the Commissioner team or SPG need to make a call, we're going to call it for what it is and say, well, look, sorry, but you know, we do actually have to move on now. And so at least, even if you don't agree with the call that's been made, you can go, okay, well, a decision's been made, and now we need to move on.
No, that's fair.
It's funny to suggest that we have more opportunities for dialogue. I'm an allied health professional, and for quite a few weeks near the end of last year, I was trying to seek out who the person I would speak with, and I was told to go to the internet and provide feedback, but for me that's not sufficient. And I know that because I think that the people that are doing this planning have a lot to learn from us as well. Okay, and by doing that as requiring dialogue. So, and I know that there have been opportunities for forums and the big forum, but people get lost in that, you know, and just short space of time. And I think it would be a lot more efficient for different disciplines to meet and have dialogue, that information can be passed through to the next, one, then have a bigger meeting.
I think, John, you've done some work on the Facilities and Transformation Group. You've refreshed the terms of reference for it, which makes it a lot clearer in terms of the expectations of what those groups are going to have. And I guess that's a question, looking at all of you over there, the question of so what opportunities of slight mixing of the people that are involved in those groups to meet in perhaps less formal way than these sorts of presentations to be able to communicate. One of the other things that we have really, that I'm pretty strong on is there will be facilities and transformation groups that will not reach an agreement. There will be divergent views, and to me it is vital that where there are divergent views within any of these groups, that their views are documented so that the advice that I can receive from the clinical leadership group is balanced on confidence that the CLG understands the divergent views. Likewise, if CLG can't reach a consensus and a decision is required, then I would expect the divergent views to be documented so that we can be well informed when people further through the process have to make calls.
Can I just say that I absolutely acknowledge people's concerns about process in the relatively brief time that I've been involved. I think a lot of that was forced on us by the timescales that we were trying to meet, and the planners and everyone else was under a lot of pressure. We have tried to put in place some new process that will clarify the processing structure so that hopefully in the future that might be different. But we need to hear if it's not, and if people are feeling that they're not doing back or whatever. I know already we're under pressure again about time,
which John and I are going to have a talk about after this meeting.
And I think that collaboration between us and the planners and the ministry, we need to make sure that as a clinical group we have the time to consider and respond and deliver the kind of high quality advice that's needed to get this as right as we can. So we're trying. If it's not working, you need to tell us so that we can try and figure it out.
Just one of the things that we've found difficult with some of the big documents, and I don't know if there's, well, I think there could be a better way around it, but because this is work on top of your just work as normal, and so we have to try and, we know it's important, we want to do it, but to go and read a 50-page document where there's some really key areas that we just really want to read, and I would like to see that improved somehow so that the really key things are summarised, and especially when there's been change. So you get the feedback, there's been change. I don't want to have to go and read through a 50-page document again to find this one key point, whether that's been recognised or not.
The other thing
that I'd just like to say is that I think with that initial process there were some, when you're talking about the planners coming in and coming out, that there was really good engagement and then people just got really disillusioned, and I think it would be, maybe this is asking too much, but it might be timely for the project team to look at who's on all of the key groups and make sure that that now is actually the right people, because workforce changes, people get sick, things have moved, and we're not always getting the right information because we haven't got the right people being told when the meetings are on, and I think that needs to be looked at again.
I think there's a couple of disciplines there. One, I got quite irritated at when large documents would come out that have been amended. In today's world, track changes, it's pretty easy to make sure that's turned on in documents, because actually, if you've read a 50-page document and it's actually on page 12 that you made comment, turn to page 12 and see the track changes. Secondly, the CLG is being reshaped presently, isn't it, Mr. John? And the facilities and transformation groups are being reformed, so those processes and opportunities are there. I guess the difference between the IBC and now is many of you have lived through lots of processes whereby we started processes and it didn't then turn into fruition. This is happening, and so there is a stronger realisation that this isn't an academic exercise. It's going to physically happen. And if we don't get it right, we're going to be living with the consequences.
Chris, again, sorry to interrupt, but perhaps I should say that it's absolutely right that the CLG and the user groups that we're called and are now called FIT groups, and we can thank Carolyn Moore for that acronym, which is really apposite, I think, are being reformed. And I know that Carolyn and Hamish and Carolyn and the team are working with looking at who's on those groups. What we want is greater consistency. We're also thinking that there's going to be a clinical lead in each of those groups that's going to have more dialogue with the planners and with the PMO, so that the transfer of information is better. And yes, we want the FIT groups minuted. We want to have greater documentation, and we're working on a sign-off kind of process about how the decisions are transmitted from the FIT groups to the CLG, to the FRE and to the SPG, so that we make sure that we are taking account of things where we should be. So we hope that we're doing something in the process that is answering some of your questions. We don't know, but we will try to make sure that as far as possible we can do that.
You almost sounded like you were on Yes Minister.
Yeah, that's
CLDs.
how times change.